Johannesburg is hosting a BRICS seminar on governance. All BRICS members are represented. They are Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. The purpose of the seminar is to exchange ideas on good governance and enhance cooperation to ensure global good governance. CGTN's Yolisa and Njamela has been attending the seminar and filed this report.
Over 100 senior leaders and think tanks have gathered here. Key to this seminar is to share experiences on how to build effective global governance, to also expand exchange and cooperation. All BRICS members highlighted that the exchanges and discussions of governance and mutual learnings here are of great significance for BRICS countries to achieve greater development in the future, especially for the people.
We have a duty and an obligation not to use political rhetoric to win applause and smiles, and to ensure that our institutions are not just characterized by bureaucratic compliance. Within the political South, we must build institutions that are innovative, that are agile, that work differently to ensure that they work for the interests of the people in order to overcome global poverty, unemployment and inequality.
BRICS cooperation not only provides new solutions to global economic governance, but also reflects the understanding of emerging and developing economies on building a more equal-footed new order of global governance, a governance that can bring the mankind into sustainable development. The senior leaders here emphasize the need for building of a community with a shared future for humankind, with the people at the center.
We take the people's aspiration for a good life as our goal, implementation of the people-first concept in all governance work, keep pushing forward socialism with Chinese characteristics, and strive for historic achievements in the parties and nations' undertakings.
In a report by the Chinese President Xi Jinping at the 19th CPC National Congress in October last year, one of the key issues outlined was the importance of ensuring that people are at the center of everything.
In that report, in which he mentioned the people more than 200 times, he has set an example in caring for the people and has traveled nearly all over the country, including all of the extremely poor areas. It is safe to say that the CPC's People's First concept has become a powerful force that keeps all Chinese people united and will help realize the Chinese dream.
These discussions will be featured in the BRICS Leadership Summit due to take place later this month. Yolisa and Njamela, CGTN, Centin Convention Center, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's get you more perspective now on that story. I'm joined live from Johannesburg by Professor Patrick Bond. He's a political and economic analyst from the School of Governance at the Wits University. Professor, now BRICS nations have vastly different forms of governance. So why is it important for the members to discuss governance at this seminar?
Well, it's great to be with you and your viewers. And I think the main reason that they need more unity, even in diversity, is global malgovernance. So the out-of-control US President Trump, the self-destructive European Union have together meant that we don't have a very good global climate regime, the most important problem for the next generations. The Paris Climate Agreement doesn't do enough to cut the emissions of the West or of the BRICS. And so that'll be the first big challenge to stop our humanity from destroying itself. And the second would be the international financial malgovernance. You know, the International Monetary Fund is still run more or less for Western interests, and unfortunately the BRICS got more voting power in the last round in 2015. However, that came at the expense of African countries. So that's another area where the BRICS will have to work harder to have really just governance instead of simply getting a seat at a table of malgovernance at the global scale.
Right. When we look at that governance, though, on a global scale and looking at a country like China, there've got to be lessons here for African countries when it comes to good governance. So what can African countries learn from China, though, when it comes to good governance?
Well, you know, I'm biased, but I really think that something happened in 1949 in China that all African peoples can learn from, and that was to get rid of injustice. It required a social revolution, but in the process, it meant that China didn't follow blindly Western corporate power, which is what unfortunately African countries have since colonialism ended. So for example, that means that China didn't until very recently didn't comply with intellectual property rights. Now that meant here in South Africa, by not agreeing to Western intellectual property, we've had AIDS medicines that have been made available to about 5 million people, and our life expectancy has risen from 52 to 65. A similar example would be in finance, because China just 2 years ago put on very strong exchange controls to stop the flows of funds. And as you know, Africa has a terrible problem with the illicit financial outflows of funds, and we need to take the strength of China versus speculators and financiers. Those would be some of the examples. Another is really the power of the people in China. They continue to have protests, even against social credit and various disincentives, and that does make the Chinese authorities pay attention. I think Africans are doing that as well, but perhaps the big challenge will be the unlimited term limits for the Chinese premier. That's the next big challenge for Chinese governance, it looks like, from this side.
Right, and as I mentioned earlier, though, the BRICS nations have vastly different forms of governance. So what are the challenges, though, that still hamper good governance among BRICS member states?
Well, let's just take one by one very briefly. In Brazil, the most popular politician who ran the country for 8 years, Lula Ignacio da Silva, the Workers' Party leader, has been put in jail on a frame-up, and his predecessor, Dilma Rousseff. These were two great BRICS leaders, and the coup government of Michel Temer has very unjustly set its own corruption standards at a very low level, but really nailed these two. So that would be the most obvious in Brazil. In Russia, the number 2 politician in the country after Putin, Navalny, is not even allowed to run for president, so there's a degree of repression there. In India, it was recently named the most dangerous place in the world for women, for the gender and good governance agenda. That's going to be critical to change, and the Indian government is considered proto-fascist. Here in South Africa, we've had very severe problems with corruption. They continue. We did have a palace coup. It went peacefully. There was no bloodshed in kicking out President Jacob Zuma in February, but unfortunately a great deal of the corrupt officials, and I'll be very frank, our corporations are considered the most corrupt in the world in the PricewaterhouseCoopers surveys of economic crime. So it seems to me between governance in the state, which is lacking, and particularly governance of our corporations here in Johannesburg, where the BRICS leaders will meet, this might be the biggest problem of all.
All right, Professor Patrick Bond joining us there from Johannesburg. Thank you.